Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Mind and Muse from Planet FM 87.6. This is your RJ Imad Kasir, and today we have a special episode as we celebrate World Translation Day coming up on 30th September. Our guest is a very special one, and we would love to hear to him, and he'll be soon with us. Mr. Raza Naeem. He will be with us from Lahore on telephone line, and let's welcome Raza Naeem. Raza, can you hear us? Okay, Raza Naeem is the president of Progressive Writers Association in Lahore, and he has translated legends like Saadat Hasan Manto, Abdullah Hussain, Krishan Chandra, and Kishwar Nahid. And interestingly, just today he is being awarded with the Anjum Romani Award, an honor named after the man who translated Iqbal's Persian poetry into Urdu. And we are thrilled to dive into his world of words, translations, books, politics of literature, and much more. And listeners, you are listening to FM 87.6 Mind and Muse. You can catch us live from on www.radio.gov.pk/live-streaming. So let's welcome our esteemed guest, Mr. Raza Naeem. Raza, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you, Imad. I can hear you.
Raza Naeem, as I mentioned earlier, he is an award-winning Pakistani writer, researcher, translator, trained in political economy at the University of Leeds in UK. Then he had his PhD from USA. He is the recipient of prestigious Charles Wallace Trust Fellowship in the UK for his translation of non-fiction works of Saadat Hasan Manto, and most recently he was runner-up and finalist at the inaugural Jawad Memorial Prize for Urdu English translations, and awarded for his translation of Abdullah Hussain's work. He has also written the foreword of the reissued edition of Abdullah Hussain's classic novel, The Weary Generations, Udas Naslein. His work has been widely recognized both internationally and nationally, as well as it's translated into other languages like Tamil, Bengali, and most recently Gurmukhi, Punjabi, and he has been selected for presentation at important international festivals in Canada, in India, and in the Middle East also, and he has really brought a lot of recognition to this country, and he had been a participant at the last year's South Asian Literature in Translation Summer School held in Colombo last year in August, and he was among only 41 fellow translators from all around the world. He is based in Lahore, and he is the president of the Progressive Writers Association, Anjuman Taraqi Pasand Musannifin. So this was his introduction, and let's talk to Raza Naeem. Assalamu alaikum, Raza.
Imad.
Assalamu alaikum, Raza. Can you hear me?
Ji walaikum salam, Imad. Yes, I can hear you very well. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Raza, let's start with a personal one. What first drew you to the world of translation? Was there a book, an author, or a moment that sparked it all?
Actually, that's an interesting question, and there are two ways to answer it. First is a relatively straightforward one. I think I am a very political person. Before I used to read and write, obviously, from the very young age, and I was very much politicized during my undergraduate degree in Lahore, and we can talk about that later on. And then the 9/11 happened, and I went to UK just 3 days afterwards. And the Musharraf government had consolidated power in Pakistan, so we were all very politicized. And when you read and write in that environment, you read everything very politically. So I had already been, I had joined the Mazdoor Kisan Party before I left for UK, and then I went on to, serve the party for about 20-25 years. And basically, that was about politically active role. And how I came to translation, one way to answer it is that it was just an extension of my political work, albeit a less activist role. But again, one can argue that translation is also a sort of activism. So that's one way to answer this question. It was just an extension of the political work which I had done earlier. Secondly, it was almost an accident, because I had never really thought, now that I look back, that I would really take to translation. But maybe somewhere, because down in our inner selves, we all enjoy all these works by Russian writers, French writers. All the world's great literature. I think all of us have come to read in translation because we can't speak all those languages. So, Manto's centenary year was in the year 2012. It was celebrated all over the world where Urdu is spoken. And I wanted to pay my tribute to him. He had been such a formative part of my teen life. And I wrote to the editor of Frontline, which is a very, very well-regarded journal in India. It's one of the best independent journals in the South Asian subcontinent, in my opinion. And they welcomed me saying, of course, we would love you to write a tribute to Manto. So, I just did a bit of a hack job, if you like, not knowing what's going to happen. I sent off the tribute, and then my editor got back to me within 24 hours. He said, look, the journal is established in the south of India, which is a totally different planet from the north side, where Urdu is not really spoken. It's based in Chennai, which was known as Madras. So here we don't know Manto as much as you think we would. So you have to redo the whole thing. You have to include some translations from Urdu. You'll have to work hard, but it must be worth it if you want to pay a tribute to. Apparently, he had heard of Manto, so he obviously wanted me to write a fuller tribute. So then I went back to the drawing board, so to speak. I burnt midnight oil, and wo jisko raat aur din ek karna kehte hain. And that was the time when I also began to see Manto's non-fiction for what it was. And I produced a long article. This was in May 2012, and it ran into 2 installments, and that is basically that 2012 May. That was really my first stint at translation, which really launched me, if one would say, into taking translation seriously in my own writing.
That's really fascinating. Raza, you trained in political economy and development studies. How has that background shaped your literary and translation work?
Well, actually, very little, if I may say, because there is no. I was the first. I think. More than the degree I enrolled in, it was the experience of going abroad to do that degree which really shaped me, for many, many years to come, and continues to shape me. I took economics as a major in my undergrad for 3 years, and that was not a really good experience. And it's such a boring subject, with due respect to economists. It was a dry subject which seemed to have little relevance to the outside world. And of course, by that time, I had joined the Mazdoor Kisan Party as a sympathizer. I took a very interesting course in development economics with my teacher, Dr. Taimur Rahman, who, is a very well-known intellectual and political figure now in Pakistan and abroad. So that course really, transformed my whole worldview. And before I took that course, I didn't really think that teachers could transform your worldview. But that course it was totally different from economics. I mean, it incorporated all of the major social sciences in a very interesting way. We read from different writers, and we saw a lot of documentaries about liberation struggles in Africa, Latin America. So that was the first time I learned about someone like Fidel Castro, for example, who is a very inspirational figure in the history of liberation struggles in the 20th century. And, Basil Davidson, who has written wonderful books on Africa, being a white man from a totally third world perspective. So when I took that course, I thought, well, what am I doing with myself? I probably should opt for a social science, when I go abroad. And my father still accuses me in a light-hearted manner that, you hoodwinked me and you tricked me to enroll in development economics, but then you came back with a degree in development studies. So that was the story behind my taking development studies. But actually, if I were really to make good use of that degree, I would probably have been still in the state bank, like you are, my friend, or maybe I would have been a director or retired in Karachi, or I don't know, or maybe I would have come to the World Bank or IMF. This is basically the fate of most development graduates, especially who have come from abroad. There are many people in this field who are now heads of non-governmental organizations. They are taking six-figure salaries, but I think I consciously avoided that path. And so yes, in that respect, my degree prepared me for the paths which I was not going to take. That is the connection. The path which I was not going to take, I repeat. And although I never thought I would be, maybe doing academics, maybe, or research, or even translation.
Such clarity that really adds depth to our conversation. Raza, you have lived and studied in UK and US, and then you have been to Yemen, Egypt, Turkey, and all the Middle Eastern countries. How have these international experiences influenced your literary lens and your choice of works to translate?
Yes, again, I would have to go back to my undergraduate years in Lahore. Basically, I was educated at a very top private school called the Lahore School of Economics. And, before coming to the undergrad, I was a very insulated kind of middle-class individual, really not knowing about my surroundings. Almost like you exist in a bubble, without any regard for what's going on in the world. Very much safe in my own class and secure in my, in a very, pure sort of way, reading my classics and accumulating books. And I am not really worrying about the state of the world. And I think there are so many people who do that. And with scarcely a thought for those who are lesser privileged than we are, or world events or world history. But when I entered the LSE, I think joined the Mazdoor Kisan Party, let's say around 99 or 2000, and Dr. Taimur Rahman, whom I have mentioned earlier, was my teacher. So we used to discuss all these things which we talked about in class, outside class, the revolutions which had happened, the Iranian revolution, because Iran is just next door to Pakistan. You can't ignore that country. What had happened in Afghanistan, with King Amanullah when he tried to modernize. And, so a very comparative perspective which Dr. Taimur encouraged, and all our debates, with our comrades on listservs, on email, we had heated exchanges about the state of the world. And that is also where I began to read Edward Said, who is a very phenomenal and presence if you talk about Palestine and, even cultural criticism. I remember I was assigned his book Culture and Imperialism in my English course, and reading that was a very big and hard book, and I was 21 or 20 years of age at that time. So that book really left a big impression. And also reading someone like Ejaz Ahmed, who I would later correspond with on email. Sadly, he is no longer with us now. All these things. And later on, that whole experience of spending a year in the UK, just 3 days after 9/11, it really politicized me a lot. And, it was basically a year of independent living. That was the first time which I had lived abroad outside my home, and I think that experience really came in handy when I would later on make the journeys which you refer to, in the United States. And also, so the interest in the Middle East was always there, since my undergraduate days. And, also after 9/11, suddenly there was open season Muslims everywhere. Muslims began to be viewed with an Orientalist lens. People like Bernard Lewis or, so we used to have those debates with our Palestinian. I mean, that's the example, that's the advantage you have of an international education. I always encourage my students to think about going abroad, whether as a tourist or as a student. As a student, because then you engage. I mean, I have lots of friends, and I still engage with them from other parts of the Muslim world. Like Palestine, like Yemen, and that was my window to all these amazing transformations which had happened in a different area, from Pakistan. So, I mean, and then much later, and I would take up translation. This opened up an amazing world of cross-cultural relevance and fertilization. So this told me that Pakistan was not at the center of the world. There are other cultures and other countries which are equally important, which have buried histories, and you have to really engage with the people of those countries in order to have a view rather than just pontificate from your armchair. Because, let's not forget it's Karl Marx, the great philosopher, who said that the philosophers have only interpreted the world. The point, however, is to change it. So if you are even going to get nearer to changing the world, you have to engage with the work. You have to engage with the people of that region. So yes, all these different journeys in the United States, in Turkey, in Egypt, in Yemen. Last year I was in Colombo, and even in different parts of Pakistan, which I had not visited before. I mean, they have added to me. I mean, and they have told me that ultimately, a language is the most beautiful thing invented by man, and basically every human being desires and dreams of the same sort of things, especially the common man, whether they are living in Cairo or on the streets of Istanbul or in Lahore, they are motivated by the same sorts of impulses, to go forward and live their lives according to a certain dynamic. This is what I have learned from all my different forays and journeys across the world.
Raza, you have framed that beautifully, and I really appreciate that perspective. So this was some your early inspirations and your personal journey across the globe. And now let's have some focus on the translations. And as I mentioned in my intro, that World Translation Day is being celebrated on 30th of this month. So it's all about bridging cultures. What, in your experience, is the hardest and the most rewarding part of translating literature?
Can you repeat your question?
Raza, I was asking that what, in your experience, is the hardest and the most rewarding part of translating literature?
Yes, thank you for asking that. Hardest and most rewarding. Let me break it down. Let me come to the hardest part first. I think I think probably the answer will be the same. Just to struggle to get to the right word. A word which may have multiple meanings, but you struggle with it, and you struggle for days the same word may have multiple meanings, but how it is used in a particular text, and whether you want to use it again and again, or you want to display the beauty of a language by employing another variant of the same word. I mean, this choice is like a Hobson's choice. It haunts you. And I mean, you may also put it in wordplay. So, I mean, this is, I think, one of the hardest, if not the hardest tasks, how to convey us the sense of a word in a different language. I mean, in a language which you're translating from, to the audience of a language in which you are trying to translate it, and whether that word is going to, convey the accurate meaning. That is the hardest part, and also we may talk about it further. I believe that prose is probably easier to translate, but poems I have often struggled with. Although even hopefully we ask that question, there are some very convoluted pieces of writing which have layers upon layers, and these days, although the world is moving towards zero-degree writing, but there are still novels in Urdu even being written which pride themselves on multiple layers, and really the author, the reader has to decipher it, what to talk about translator so often. But poems are, I think, one of the hardest things to translate, and the choice whether to put it in rhyming diction, or just to let it go and just convey the real spirit of the word. These are among some of the hardest parts. I think the most rewarding part, Imad, is when you have finally conveyed. You can only try. You have tried to convey the joy of reading the original as a reader to an audience which does not understand the source language, but it comes closer to. This is the impulse which actually motivated me to translate, just to convey the sheer joy. If I've enjoyed something, then why shouldn't my readers, who will be reading the text in the original, the translated language, I beg your pardon. So that is the most rewarding part, when you finally think that you've done, although you're never really done, but after 5 or 6 drafts of translation, when you are ready to send it off to your editor or your publisher, you never pat yourself on the back like a job well done. Translation in that respect is a work in progress. But I think it's really rewarding when you recognize that you have probably, removed yourself from between the reader and the text, and that now you can sit back and let the reader enjoy the text. And maybe if you are very lucky, or if the original writing is very lucky, just maybe the reader will be curious to go back to the original text and not really think of you as an extended nuisance, if you like.
Raza, you mentioned that translating poetry, you find it a bit more harder than translating prose. But one couplet, you have translated poems and couplets very beautifully, and one couplet I would like to share with the listeners, and that is my favorite due to obvious reason. The couplet, the very famous couplet, गुलाम मोहम्मद कासिर साहब couplet, करूँगा क्या जो मोहब्बत में हो गया नाकाम, मुझे तो और कोई काम भी नहीं आता. And listeners, look at the translation from Raza Naeem. Failing in love, what to do I ask. In life I have learned no other task. So this is such a beautiful translation of that iconic couplet from Ghulam Muhammad Kasir marhum. Raza, you work in multiple languages, English, Urdu, and Arabic also, and you have translated works also from Punjabi, Sindhi, and most recently from Pashto also, that Pashto famous poet Kalandar Mohammad's book Sabaun. You are these days working on that book also. So do you approach each language differently in translation?
Well, yes, that is actually quite the task, isn't it? So you just mentioned मुझे तो कोई और काम भी नहीं आता, so I'll pick up that translated couplet. Quite the task, that is quite the task, that if I try to approach the same language, I think in a way, at least with our own South Asian languages like Urdu, Pashto, and Sindhi, I think it's easier because they all belong to the same language group, and Sindhi more so closer to Punjabi and Urdu. Although for a very long time I was also under the impression, and of course it's a very erroneous impression, I must say, that Sindhi, if you can't understand Sindhi even if you understand Punjabi. I think nothing further could be from the truth. I spent 4 years in Karachi and interacted with a lot of Sindhis and continue to interact with them even in Lahore and Islamabad, and I think Sindhi is very close to Punjabi and Urdu, so there is no problem. Yes, maybe the written script is a bit different, but I think for a translator, whatever the language, the approach to every language has to be the same. I think people who love language love translation. I love wordplay. I mean, wordplay. I think so that's an approach which you have to take. I think you have to bring whatever, whether it's Arabic or it's Pashto, because I think I said earlier that language is the most beautiful thing invented by man. So you have to approach each language like a mother, because every person who speaks a mother language, it's not just like the mother. So if you're a translator trying to convey the beauty and sensitivity of a language to an English reader, how dare you? How can you even try to mess around with it or put your own meaning on it? So I try, even though Arabic language has a different source than our South Asian languages, but because it's all in our DNA, because all of us have studied the Quran in our childhood, and we've grown up with it. And there is a lot of similarity. Some words we use in all the languages from Arabic and Farsi. So I try to approach every language with the same sensitivity that, I bring to our own part of the world. Although it also helps that, I have, you mentioned, I have actually, taken 2 semesters of Arabic, and that was probably the only good thing I did while I was in the United States. And then I had a chance to speak Arabic in Yemen on my way back from the United States. And, so yeah, that also helps. If you're surrounded by the culture, if you're surrounded by the people of whose language you are trying to translate and replicate in English, then that also helps. So in my case, I think I have been very lucky. Although I am not the sort of person who would like their translation to be about whom should be said that, oh, ispe to bilkul asal ka guman hai. I am not one of those people. I never try to translate so that people can say there is absolutely no difference. Raza, wonderful. We don't know the difference between the original language and the target language. I am not one of those people. I think one can try, but that's not my concern. I want to bring out the differences, in languages as well, so that people can also appreciate the original work. If my translation provokes them into consulting the original work, then I think that is a really successful effort on my part.
That's really deep and thought-provoking. Listeners, we are having a wonderful discussion with our esteemed guest, Raza Naeem, who is an award-winning translator, an author, and a social scientist. So that's really great, and I'm grateful to you for taking time out, Raza. Even today, your a review is published in today's paper, A Peach of a Tale, Ek Aadu, Ek Hazar Aadu, and it's the works of Samad Behrangi, and translated by Tahire Gomesh from Turkish to English, and you have reviewed that. So tell our listeners a little about that.
Yes, although Samad Behrangi does not need an introduction within Iran, he's a very distinguished name when you talk about Iranian writers of the 20th century. I first learnt about him in Sibte Hassan's iconic work, Inqilab-e-Iran, and it is still one of my favorite works on Iran, although it was published in 1980. I hope to translate it into English one day. But talking about Samad Behrangi, I mean, he was one of those people who was a Marxist, but who consciously wrote children's stories in order to convey a sense of resistance. And remember, this is the time when a very, very dictatorial regime of the Pahlavi dynasty was in operation in Iran, and many of Iran's best writers had been consumed regime, whether they had committed suicide. I think we all know about Sadiq Hidayat, whose wonderful novel Boufcour is now a classic. He committed suicide in Paris. I mean, others were outright sent into exile. And also about Samad Behrangi, he swam to his death on August 31, 1968, and it is suspected that he did not drown, rather he was actually, he was actually suffocated and killed by the Sawak, which was the fearsome secret police of the Shah of Iran, Raza Shah Pahlavi, because Samad Behrangi was last seen in the company of a Sawak officer. But that was unfortunate because Samad Behrangi was only 30 when he passed away, but not before he had given us some of his best work. I reviewed his earlier work for the Friday Times, which was, Mahi Sya Chulu, which is, as you know, Little Black Fish, which is one of the most loved children's classics around the world. I reviewed it last month on Samad Behrangi's death anniversary for the Friday Times, and and I think that story deserves to be put alongside, the Little Prince, which is a much beloved and much translated children's story. But it's not only about children. And Samad Behrangi's other work, Yek Helu, Yak Hazar Helu, which I have reviewed in in its Urdu translation by Tariq today in the news. Also, apparently it's about the story of a peach seed, but it conveys the sense of resistance. I mean, how do you confront fascism when all avenues for it have been closed? Just like Iranian mill films, if you read this story, unfortunately, I don't speak Farsi, so I was actually quite delighted when ML Publications from Islamabad, who you might know because you're also living in Islamabad, they sent me both of these books by Samad Behrangi, and I was so much impressed. And because I'm also a translator, I often read translations and I often review them as well. So I reviewed both of these translations by Tahir Gunesh for two different publications. So reading this title today, still Iran is under an authoritarian regime. I wouldn't like to compare, though. So some of the world's best art is being produced in Iran, and as people, there are wonderful that filmmakers like Jafar Panahi who have been persecuted for making daring films, but even Jafar Panahi, had to make his latest bestseller. He got the Cannes Film Award, which is the most prestigious award after the Oscar, while the film had to be smuggled out of Iran to France to be shown to everybody. So this is, I think, I think some of the best. Samad Behrangi's work is a testament to the fact that some of the best works are produced in times of adversity. And I would invite your readers to also consider when they talk about people like Samad Behrangi, I don't think Samad Behrangi would have ever thought that his audience would become international, almost 50 plus years after his death. So I think here in Pakistan, he should be better known because we have a long-standing relationship with Iran and, of course, the Farsi language. So and that is the reason I thought that this work needs to be, because he has been translated much less, So when the Urdu translation was made and I got to know about it, I immediately jumped and I thought that both of these works are important in their own right and they need to be, reviewed. And this is what the work of a translation does. It tells a universal tale across borders. So you think you may be sitting in Lahore or Islamabad or Peshawar, but you feel like you're also swimming in the river with Samad Behrangi, and what he must have thought on that day, fateful day when he was drowned or killed. He is the creator of such beautiful children's stories which actually should be read by adults also, like Ibn Insha said, जो बच्चों की तरह के वाले हैं, बालिग बच्चों के लिए भी है ये. So this is also for mature children as well, and it preserves, works like this preserve the innocence of childhood in adults as well. So that's the reason I reviewed both of these.
That's not just informative, that's inspiring too. Raza, your translation of Bahar by Abdullah Hussain was a finalist for the Jawad Memorial Prize. Tell us about that story.
Yes, thank you for taking me back to one of the triumphal, one of the few triumphal moments of my humble translation career, if I may put it. Actually, that was an inspired moment. I was haunted by the death of Abdullah Hussain. Many years ago when he was still alive. I think it was 2003 or 4. The editor of one of the top literary supplements in Pakistan. They sent me. They asked me if I would like to review Abdullah Hussain's work. It was called Fareb. It was his collection of short stories, and I said, of course, who wouldn't want to review? I was actually quite touched by them wanting me to review it, but I said that I will only review it when I meet the writer, because I thought this was a way to meet the great writer Abdullah Hussain, and it was such. I don't know, I always thought that he lived in Islamabad because I had heard he had grown up in Rawalpindi. And later on, 5 or 6 months later, I got to know that he passed away, and he was living just a few blocks from my home in DHA. And I was so anguished. I said, I was all this while searching for a way to go to Islamabad, and this writer, this great writer, who has given much to Urdu and English letters, he was just living a few blocks. I mean, I was gutted. And then I instinctively reached for that collection, which proved to be his final work, Fareb. And first I reviewed it as a tribute on his first death anniversary a year later on the 4th of July 2006. And then obviously I had read the book cover to cover. Remember, these were the days when I wasn't really translating a lot, and I mean, I never took to translation. I never trained for it. Translation was and remains solely a work of passion. Nowadays, you have so many opportunities for translators. You have mentorships, you have translation prizes, whatnot, Booker Prize, even the Nobel Prize, is given on the strength of a translation into English. So I remembered this story, and it made quite an impression upon me. Bahar, and the title is so simple, beautiful and deceptive, but if you have read that story, I mean, the language is so spare. It's, that's how Abdullah Hussain wrote. I mean, उन्होंने कभी अपने आप को हाले ज़बान मंटो की तरह नहीं साबित किया, क्योंकि पंजाबी उनकी मादरी ज़बान थी. And many people also made fun of him, like they made of Manto, that, he has so many grammatical errors in his work. But, I mean, those critics are nowhere, and we continue to talk about Abdullah Hussain 20 years after he passed away, 10 years after he passed away. So that story, I mean, the title is very deceptive, but I just began to translate it, and the effect of his death was very fresh in my mind. I thought, rather maybe I was guilty. I thought I couldn't meet this person when he was alive. Let me just try to make up for my guilt. And obviously I had no idea that the judges would like it so much. But again, the story, I reread it a few months ago, and it was still as fresh. And I wouldn't want to spoil the fun. I would ask readers to, the Bahar. The Bahar is part of his last collection called Fareb. It's published by Sange Meal. I wouldn't want to spoil your readers' curiosity by giving the plot away, but it's a beautiful and very tragic story at the same time. And the fact that life is fleeting, and you can never really trust that it will treat you in the same manner as before. You have to earn that life, and there are days of spring and there are days of autumn. And it ends on a very chilling note, which I tried to convey. I was quite shocked by the ending, and I wanted to convey that as well, and also convey the ebb and flow of the story, that, it was moving in a certain narrative and very predictable, but then it totally twisted. And, so now when I reread that story, I think I want to translate the whole collection now, because I haven't talked to his daughter Noorappa about it. She's been very kind to me, because she persisted with me all these years when I was trying to translate his other novella, Kaz, and I couldn't really get it done. But in our last meeting a few months ago, she said, you want to do it, it's your book. So I think I am also going to because that collection has, I mean, it conveys a flavor of Punjabi which you have found in very few Urdu writers. I mean, maybe you have seen my piece on Abdullah Hussain in the News on Sunday. It came out on his 10th anniversary in August. I have also argued in that piece that I think it's the last paragraph. You can refer, you can maybe add a reference to that article in the interview, this story, this collection conveys a Punjabiyat which is rare in Urdu. I mean, I think I've only seen Premchand or Imad Kasir been able to convey that. So I think I would like to translate all the other 6-7 stories in the collection. So yeah, I mean, the experience was very satisfying, and I mean, although you don't write or translate for prizes, but I think this is what keeps you motivated and on your toes, and that prize really did a lot for my belief in myself, in my power of translation and conveying a sense of the Urdu text to my reader. It really did wonders for my self-confidence,
Yes, Raza, this is always encouraging when your work is acknowledged, and this is a great feeling. Raza, tell us about that Charles Wallace Trust Fellowship that you won in the UK for translating Manto's non-fictional work. I referred to it in my intro, and you had a month's stay in Bradford for that fellowship. So tell us about that experience also.
Yes, I think I mentioned that in 2012 I had written this long piece for Frontline on Salih Manto's 100th birthday, and apparently that piece, because the minute it was published in Frontline, I began to get emails from Tamil journals, Bengali newspapers for interviews, for retranslations, and that really told me that Manto, although he couldn't speak some of these languages from the south of India, I mean, he of course was a great translator, and it was him as a translator which inspired me to take up translation. Although we know Manto left translation and he went on to become a great storyteller. I'm still inventing myself in that way. So when those emails came, and one of my friends, Shobik Desh Sarkar from Calcutta, those were the days when you could still get an odd package from India. He actually was so inspired by my translations of Manto's letters to Uncle Sam. He actually went ahead and translated Chacha Sam Ke Naam Khud to Bengali, and he cited me as an inspiration, and then he sent me the full book in Bengali inscribed in my name. Now that was something which was amazing. I mean, when you can have that sort of an impact on a fellow translator in a totally different language. So that experience really enabled me to take Manto's non-fiction seriously. I mean, many years later, Umar Memon Saab, who of course is one of the towering translators of our time. I mean, the day he died, I was in Karachi. I was joking to a fellow translator. I mean, क्या उन्होंने नहीं छोड़ा है हम सब के लिए translate करने के लिए, सब लोगों को तो उन्होंने translate कर लिया है. इंतजार हुसैन क्या, मंटो साहब क्या, फहमीदा रियाज क्या, और तो और अरबी में भी अलाल अस्वानी को ट्रांसलेट किया, तो क्या नहीं छोड़ा उन्होंने, सब कुछ कर लिया, अब हमारे लिए कुछ बचा ही नहीं. तो I was one of the people who made this argument in my piece for Frontline that Manto is a very political writer, and those who think that he's simply a great storyteller like Mopson, I think they ought to revisit because number one, we always pigeonhole Manto as a sort of writer of sex or partition, but that does not do justice to his whole oeuvre. I think Manto became Manto when he migrated to Pakistan. Otherwise, yes, he would have been just a great storyteller if he had remained in Bombay. It was the adversity of the 7 years he spent in Pakistan, the 3 court cases, the fact that critics and courts turned against him, that made him a great artist for all time to come, and that is also the time when he composed his wonderful essays like Chacha Sam Ke Naam Khutut, Savere Ka Laank Meri Khuli, Allah Ka Bada Fazal Hai. I have performed Allah Ka Bada Fazal Hai at a TED talk, by the way. So I began to look at his essays. People have looked at his short stories and they have translated his short stories to text, but I think I was the one who really looked at his non-fiction. And then many years later, Akar Patel, who's a very well-known journalist now, he can't go back to India. He's very critical of the Modi regime. He came out with a collection published by Trunke Bar Press, and then Umar Memon Saab obliquely referred to me in one of his edited collections, collected Manto. He said that those who argue that Manto was a political person have got it wrong, which I totally disagree with. I think he was probably responding to me because I made that argument in 2012. So, so that was why when the Charles Wallace Trust Fellowship came along, I had absolutely no idea how to apply for it. One of my friends who was teaching at LUM said that, normally if you get this fellowship, then, your path to doing a PhD is very smooth, and that motivated me. And then one of our very great academics, Aisha Siddiqa Saiba, who's now in London, very regrettably, she can't come back to Pakistan. She is the daughter of the great Urdu writer Jamila Hashmi. She mentioned to me that we don't get many good proposals about Charles Wallace from Pakistan. So I hooked up with a professor at Bradford who's now retired, and thankfully he schooled me how to write a one-page proposal without any jargon, without any technical expressions regarding Manto's non-fiction. And at that time, the idea was that after the end of the fellowship, I would write a major article on Manto. My proposal got selected. I appeared before a panel at the British Council, and I made the argument that I can't work on this proposal in Pakistan because here, you know what they say about Manto. At that time, Manto had not been given the Sitara Imtiaz, So, so I was selected. I was very happy. I think that was probably the first time Charles Wallace Trust Fellowship had been given in Pakistan for a translation. Also now in India, they have an exclusive Charles Wallace Trust for translation. There is someone called Maz bin Bilal who is an academic in India, a very good translator. He has translated Khalid's Farsi poem Charaghe Der, I think it's called, into English. So he has gotten it, but in Pakistan it was rare. So I went to Bradford for a month, and just a month, because my supervisor said, if you normally they fund for 3 months, but they said you have been all over the world, so you don't need to stay there for 3 months. You've got your education in UK, you've been there a lot, so if you apply for 3 months, you will not get it. So be humble and apply for a month. So yeah, I applied, and of course I had passed through Bradford. I'm in Leeds, where I did my master's degree. It's just half an hour away, but I hadn't really had the experience of living in Bradford. It's called Bradistan now because of the Pakistanis who live there. So it was a very wonderful month which I spent there, but unfortunately I couldn't get a lot done because most of my time was spent in requesting for a library card to access the books which I would be needing for writing my proposal. and by the time I got my library privileges, my fellowship was over.
That's really great, Raza, and that's really fascinating. Raza, you last year attended that South Asian literature, that seminar in Colombo, that summer school, and there you had the opportunity to meet Daisy Rockwell. You call her your mentor also. So how was that experience?
Yes, actually, not just Daisy Rockwell, who actually is my mentor in the field which I have chosen to express myself translation, but also Gitanjali Shri.
That's great.
The Hindi writer who Daisy Rockwell made famous, as you know, when in 2022, Daisy, translated her little read Hindi novel, Ret Samadhi, into a global bestseller called, Ret Samadhi, which won the International Booker Prize, which is the richest and most prestigious prize for translation after the Nobel Prize, And also I met one of our great Urdu playwrights, Asghar Wajahat Saab, also in in the Colombo, because he was the writer in residence whose story we all attempted to translate into English in the workshop. So I wouldn't probably have met Asghar Saab, and he quickly became my. I think Bezi, of course, was very busy with meetings and interviews, but Asghar Saab had a lot of free time, and he was. Yes, so I was mentioning that I also met Daisy Rockwell, and the Hindi writer which she made famous when she translated Gitanjali Shri, when Daisy translated her novel Red Samadhi as Tombs of Sand, and also Asghar Wajahat Saab, who's one of our most distinguished writers and playwrights wherever Urdu is spoken. I spent a lot of time with him, on the seaside of Colombo, eating dinner, talking to him about his latest film project, which is going to be soon. It's called Lahore 1947, by the way, his film project for which he has written this film for Amir Khan Productions, and also his latest novel, which was translated into Urdu from Hindi, Saat Asman. So I wouldn't have had this experience if they had not selected me among only 40 translators from around the world as part of this University of Chicago initiative called South Asian Literature in Translation, SALT. And obviously, they were very generous to fund me all the way. Although all the way is bad, because of course we are in Lahore and that is Colombo. But it was important to have this workshop in a neutral place. Regrettably, we couldn't have had this workshop in, let's say, Lahore or Delhi because of the ongoing tensions between both India and Pakistan. But anyway, it gave us a chance to visit Colombo, which I had never done before. And even Colombo, at the height of that financial crisis last year in August, it was an eye-opening experience. And although we were ensconced in a 5-star hotel, I think I have not seen a taller hotel in Lahore, although Pakistan, I think, seems to be a much prosperous country than Sri Lanka. But the conversations which we had in those 5 days, the food, the translation, the camaraderie with other translators of other languages, that was totally, you couldn't replicate it. I have attended translation workshops before, but never in such a atmosphere in another country which is still part of South Asia. And I really made some amazing friends from South India, people who are still, I call friends, from Tamil Nadu, for example, who were so friendly when they found out that I was from Pakistan. And unlike the people from north side of India, you don't find that flag-waving patriotism which borders on insanity in people from the south. And also, I came back with I've written about this experience. Probably you have missed my piece for News on Sunday on that experience, but I have, it's sort of a funny piece as well, because I think all the fruit which I ate in Colombo, I wouldn't have been able to eat in Lahore, papayas and, star fruit and, watermelon, which was almost on its way out of season in Pakistan. And, all those conversations and literary gossip which I had with Daisy and Asghar Saab about the whims of Pakistani writers when they go to India, their various strange habits, So all of that came together in Colombo. And of course, the lovely work of language, ultimately it's about language, which I was there as a humble emerging translator. And, making all those connections with fellow Indian translators. There was someone from Karachi as well there, although Karachi is nearer to Lahore, although I haven't been there for the last 4 or 5 years. But all of it came together in Colombo, and unfortunately, under the present administration of the United States, the initiatives like SALT are now under threat because the funding has been cut from these initiatives. And I am not sure if SALT, they were supposed to come to Lahore and partner with LUMS this year, but Daisy is going to be in Lahore next month for another event. I look forward to reconnecting with her and maybe doing an event or two with her about her latest work. But the SALT initiative, unfortunately, is on hold now, so I think it now makes me rather lucky just to be able to look back and think that I was one of the lucky 40 translators which were selected. And basically what it did for me, it boosted my confidence sky high. Before attending that I used to be very humble about my work, and I said, "Oh, translators are just a nuisance between the reader and the text." But it was Daisy who told us that you market yourself, you have to be comfortable in your skin, and whoever tells you that, oh, you're a translator and something is always lost in translation, you say, no sir, something is always found in translation, and please shut up and just let the translator do the talking. How dare you say that something is. So even the title of my piece on that workshop is called Found in Translation. So this is what I have learned ultimately from that workshop, is to be comfortable in my own skin and really challenge some of the illiterate, some of the very pedestrian impressions which writers in here in Pakistan have about translation and about the role of translators. This is the newfound confidence which has enabled me to take on both short stories and poems since the last year, with a new confidence and new self-belief in my power of translation.
That's really wonderful to know. Raza,
Thank you.
It's Daisy Rockwell that she compelled you to, translate for the works of women, and you had already translated works from Kishwar Nahi, then Ishrat Afreen, and some newer voices like Fatma Osman or Niloufar Iqbal. And so, how is your experience in translating their work, and why is it important to bring these marginalized narratives into the mainstream? How do you do that with your translations?
Actually, let me correct you very quickly before coming back to your question. Niloufar Iqbal is not a new writer. She has been there for about more than 40, 50 years, and she started writing with the Fanoon of Imad Kasir, which also provided the pedestal to your own father, Ghulam Muhammad Kasir. So she is not a new writer.
No, I apologize. I said that for not for Niloufar Sahiba. That was for that was for Fatma Osman Sahiba. Anyways, continue, please.
Yeah, I thought you knew better, so it's okay. I mean, we all have those moments, but so Daisy, I think many years ago, she said somewhere 4 or 5 years ago that from now on, she's only going to translate the work of women writers. And dare I say, she has been totally faithful in that belief. I mean, I also started to look at my own translation practice of following Daisy Rockwell, and while she didn't elaborate that too much in Colombo, but I have been following her work, and these days, I mean, she has just come out with a new translation of this long prose poem by Azra Abbas Sahiba, who you know very well. She's one of our senior most Urdu poets, and she's also been translating Nisar Aziz Bhatt, another very famous writer. Her novel Gaye Dino Ka Surag, I think it's called. So she has stuck to her task, and I'm very, very impressed with her, this particular aspect of her work, and what it tells how it speaks to my own translation practice is that, I mean, I throw this challenge whenever I give a talk on translation. I mean, last week I was at the British Council. I gave a small talk on women and translation, and whenever I talk about women's writing in general, I throw this challenge to my readers. I throw this challenge to your audience and to you, Imad, as well. If we look at our own personal libraries, how many books we have in our collection which are written by women writers? I'm always ashamed at the answer. I mean, most of the books in my collection are mostly by male writers. I think that is also the case with almost everyone among your audience. So this conveys to me, it's not a matter of our reading choices. It just tells us that what place is occupied by women writers in this ocean of literature, a very small space which according to Virginia was the room of one's own they have jealously guarded. So, when you talk about women's writing, when you write on women writers, when you translate women, this becomes an act of resistance. This is also what led me to translating women writers. And also, when I reviewed Tahira Gunesh's translation of Samad Behrangi's story, Mahi Se Akuchulu, last month, August is celebrated as Women in Translation Month. So I told my editor at the Friday Times right on the byline that this translation is being reviewed because August is Women in Translation Month, and Tahira Gunesh, of course, is a very competent female translator we've got. So yeah, I mean, for me, following Daisy Rockwell, writing on women, writing about women, I have since then reviewed many works by women writers, and I have translated both older women writers like Neelam Ahmed Bashir Sahiba, also prose poems. I've translated a lot of Kishwar Appa's work. Even one of my editors once said, "Why, yaar, tum kyun itni unki kyun itni poems translate karte ho?" He got very flabbergasted. I mean, there's no answer to that. Even although Kishwar Nahid Sahaba has been very lucky, she writes a lot, and her work has been really translated all over the world in every other language. But I think this is the resistance act which doesn't tire me. I mean, she wrote a lovely poem on Mahsa Amini, the 23-year-old girl who died in police torture protesting against the Iranian regime last year. And Kishwar Appa wrote a brilliant poem on Mahsa Amini, and I felt compelled to translate it into English. Not only because it was a beautiful poem, but also because it seemed very timely, and it had a woman at the center of it as a heroine, a doomed heroine. So yeah, I mean, this is the reason. Yes, I have lots of other projects. You talked about Kalandar Moment. I'm also, translating the novella Phool Aur Patthar by
Khatir Ghaznavi Sahab.
Khatir Ghaznavi, whose Hunter's birthday is going to be coming in November. But I am also, translating Ishrat Afreen Sahiba's Junkie Diary as a sort of an urgent work, because I'm putting all other work aside, because not only because Ishrat Sahiba is a woman, but she's, I think, one of our frontline women writers who belong to the generation of Parveen Shakir. We don't mention her very frequently. I must say, because she's based in the United States, and she mostly stays away from these lobbies and also the Mushaira circuit. I mean, you'll never see her traveling to Pakistan like some of these other Pakistani women writers travel from all the way from Pakistan to UK, you'll never find Ishrat Appa like that. She is comfortable and confident in the strength of her work, and this is the reason. I mean, I wanted to translate her Kulliyat, but when this war broke out in Gaza on October 7, 2023, we'll be celebrating its anniversary very soon, second anniversary. So, I mean, I have never seen anything like Junkie Diary in any other writing of Urdu. I mean, I read a lot of poems. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. Yes, there are other people who have written the odd poem on Palestine, buoyed by the news headlines. Today is World News Day, by the way. But for someone to write a war diary as part of a project, which began when Hamas attacked Israel on October, that is very rare. I have not seen any other comparative work by any poet, male or female, since Ishrat Appa started writing. And although the book has been completed, it's not published, but the war diary is still going on. So she has one poem every other day I'm sure you are on her Facebook. I mean, she is writing non-stop, and there was this very moving poem which she wrote कि एक इमाम ने एक दुआ मांगी, 3 लाइनों की वो दुआ थी कि मेरे पास खाना नहीं है और बस इतना ही मैं कहूँगा खुतबा ये व खुतबा in the Jummah. So I mean, so this is not just the stuff of news headlines. I mean, this is war. It's a different aspect of war. I mean, it is a continuation of a war against war for resistance against Zionism by one of our frontline Urdu poets, Ishrat Appa. And of course, I call her the last progressive female writer. She is married into the family of the great Urdu poet Ali Sardar Jafri, and she has not left her progressive ethos. I mean, many other female poets have taken refuge in feminism, which is also important, but also socialism is important as well. I think class should not be lost sight of. I mean, to all that. I think for men, on many occasions we highlight gender and at the expense of class. But why can't gender and class oppression be taken together? So that is what is different about Ishrat Sahiba's poetry, that she is a woman who doesn't pride herself on just being a female poet. She is also on the front line and sitting in the United States looking at the war which has been imposed by her own country, the United States, with the collusion of Israel against a hapless population because she is unable to do anything politically about it. She is writing poems non-stop. So it is this work, talking about your earlier question, women's writing. So I thought when I read this war diary, I think this needs to be highlighted. This needs to be translated. It needs to be recited. It needs to be, highlighted. And most of my talks since the last few months have been about my translations of Ishrat Appa's Junkie Diary. And of course, war, is not just imposed by Israel on Palestine, but a poet who is sitting in the United States, she is seeing the war extended to her own country, and she is personally suffering from it. The poet is suffering from it. I mean, one of her poems is "मैं अब नज़म नहीं लिखूंगी." This basically sums up her angst, her anxiety at being unable to do anything while everyone watches silently and a genocide is taking place in front of our very eyes as we speak.
That's really wonderful, brilliantly put, and we all go through Ishrat Afrin Appa's poems, and I have seen your translations. That's simply wonderful. Raza, you were mentioning the marginalized writers, so I would like you to enlighten us about Ahmad Riaz Sahab's story, and I would like our listeners to pay special attention to this story. That how did you come to know about this story? You were mentioning that Mustansar Hussain Tarar Sahab told you about that story, so please enlighten us about Ahmad Riaz Sahab's story.
Yes, thank you. I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk about him at length. I mean, the story of Ahmad Riaz is a story of our times. It's a story of resistance, of death, of life. I mean, Ahmad Riaz was this poet who was basically born in Ludhiana, and he befriended some of the great poets of his time. Most of all, Sahir Ludhianvi, who is a very, very famous poet, as you know, and both came of age in Ludhiana before partition, and both were very popular in the mushairas. Whenever the mushairas used to happen in Ludhiana, two poems were asked to be recited the most by the audience. One, Chakle, by Sahir Ludhianvi. It's about female sex workers, and the other one was Khankahein, which has unfortunately is not well known now because Ahmad Riaz has passed into oblivion. So both of these fine poets came to Lahore after partition, and both, Ahmad Riaz was a communist. He joined the Communist Party in Ludhiana. He was also a member of the Muslim League, the local Muslim League, and of course Sahir, we know, joined the Communist Party in Pakistan. So both had a shared dream of seeing a prosperous Pakistan for the workers and peasants, but the fates of the two were totally different. I mean, Sahir Ludhianvi also came to Lahore, and his first book Talkhiyan was a world bestseller. It's still a bestseller. It still outsells many other works of poetry. He stayed here for a time, but he was persecuted and hounded out of Pakistan and went back to India. And we all know he carved out a wonderful career as a playback, a poet, and we still listen to his wonderful. I mean, he only wrote one major poem after he went back to Bombay, which is the poem on Parchaiyan, which is one of the finest anti-war poems. He became more known as a Bollywood lyricist. But what happened to our poet Ahmad Riaz? He basically, he was a worker poet, a मजदूर शायर थे, और मजदूरी उन्होंने की, और उनको कोई घर अलॉट हुआ था पार्टीशन के बाद. वो छोड़ के झुमरा चले गए वो, और वहाँ पे फैसलाबाद करीब शहर है, वहाँ घंटा घर है, उसके साथ ही मतलब लिटरली मजदूर गरीब अखबार था, उसका नाम गरीब था. तो वो गरीब अखबार लिटरली उसका मजदूर गरीब एडिटर, और साथ ही वो जहांगीर पुलाव जो कि अभी भी बड़ा मशहूर है, तो वो लेफ्ट ओवर्स रात को वो उन्हें खिलाए जाते थे एक दावत के तौर पे. तो ही यूज्ड टू कम्यूट एवरी डे फ्रॉम चक झुमरा and doing so he developed tuberculosis, and he was in his 30s at that time, began to spit blood, and he was a poet whose poems used to be published in every major journal of the time, like Savera, and his paternal grandfather, his nephew, paternal nephew, who was studying to be a doctor at Mayo Hospital, he brought him to Lahore in a very pathetic state, and and his boss said, "Why have you brought him here? He's just going to die." So they go back, send him back. And unfortunately, Ahmad Riaz died in 1968 at the age of 32 of tuberculosis. His wife also died of tuberculosis. Both of them were buried in Chakjumra. There is no grave of them now anymore. You can't go. It's a mass of mud, and who knows where he's buried. His bones are buried. So this story, I would have absolutely no idea about Ahmad Riaz if Mustansar Hussain Tahir Saab hadn't called me one day. He knew I was the president of the PWA and I translate and write on progressive poets. He said, "I've got this out-of-print collection by him called Mauje Khoon, which was published 3 years after he died. Ahmad Riaz, it's the only work of his which is existing. So I will only give it to you on the condition that you write about him. And you take the number of his surviving paternal nephew, who is, of course, in his own advanced age, and you go and meet him and get the story of Ahmad Riaz." And of course, when I jumped and I went to Mustansar Saab straight away, and he recited some of the poems of Ahmad Riaz from that book, Mauje Khoon. One of his poems, Chhata Darya, it's even better than what Sahir wrote about partition. Some of the poems are superlative. So I took that book gratefully, and I went to Dr. Anis, who is his sole surviving, Ahmad Riaz's sole surviving nephew, and he even could recite by heart this poem of Khan Kahe, which I mentioned. So it's very strange, he gave me the book and he told me the whole story of Ahmad Riaz in first person, which I got down in my notepad, and I said, why isn't this book republished? His centenary year was in 2022, and very matter-of-factly, he said that many attempts have been made to publish it. Even Mia Muhammad Azhar, who was the former Chief Minister of Punjab, they once contacted me saying that we would like this book to be published from Punjab government's patronage. But Mia Azhar Saab died soon afterwards, and the project became abandoned. It's very interesting because this nephew, he himself is a published poet. He told me that he wants someone to maybe republish the collection, but he himself is a very prosperous doctor. He is living in a bungalow in Model Town, which is a very posh part of Lahore. He himself has gotten 2 or 3 books of his published, but he did not have the resources to get his Ahmad Riaz's book published. Ahmad Riaz happens to be his paternal uncle. It's very strange. He didn't give any reasons, but obviously you can read between the lines, right? The carelessness of this is a poet. If you look at Mauje Khoon, who has written a 25-page introduction, it is Ahmad Naeem Kasmi. Look at the people who have given their opinion on Ahmad Riaz after he died. People like Faiz Ahmad Faiz are writing on the blurb. Manzoor Hussain Shore, Aligarh, who was one of the great poets of Aligarh's golden generation. Muzaffar Ali Sayyid. All of these are superlative writers and critics. They are the ones, if you look at that sole collection of Ahmad Riaz, you can find the blurbs, all of these blurbs by these great writers. But what happened to the poet? When he needed all these people to stand up for him, they weren't there. So he died while he was spitting blood. I call him the silent martyr. Because खामोश शहीद, because खून थूकते हुए मरे. और अयूब खान की जो एंटी वर्कर पॉलिसीज थी, उनके मेरे ख्याल में ये पहले विक्टिम्स में से एक थे, जो वर्कर्स को कोई प्रोटेक्शन मौजूद नहीं थी, कोई ओबीआई मौजूद नहीं था उनको प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए, कि इस तरह के गरीब मजदूर शायरों के लिए कोई बेनिफिट सिस्टम कुछ भी नहीं, पेंशन सिस्टम. ही वाज वन ऑफ द फर्स्ट विक्टिम्स. और ये शख्स खून थूकता हुआ मरा, और बकौल अहमद नदीम कासमी चूंटी की तरह जिया और चूंटी की तरह मरा, लिटरली. तो ये जो कहानी है, it speaks to us as a story of callousness. And now whenever I mention Ahmed Riaz, many people say, but there are many other writers as well. Even Imad, you can come up with another list of maybe writers, I don't know. But Ahmed Riaz didn't deserve to die like this. I mean, even his grave is no longer there. His paternal nephew, who is in his 80s now, he said that if you translate this work, I will buy a copy from you, but I can do no more than this. I mean, he wasn't even concerned with copyright, just imagine. I said, I need written permission from you to translate. He said, you don't need. I don't, it's okay, you can translate. So, I mean, basic callousness from everybody. So I got this story down and I tried to contact different newspapers, even Dawn, and they would not publish this article. So, I mean, I wrote down this story. I sent it to some literary journals. One of them found it too academic, although it was a narrative. And another journal found it too unacademic. So now I leave you to make your own conclusion. Two different opinions by two different journals. So when nothing worked, then I just presented the paper at a conference, online conference in Lucknow, a couple of years ago, where it was very favorably received. I have translated about 2 to 3 poems of Ahmed Riaz. 2 of them are already in print in Minute Mirror, and one of them it's a wonderful poem on Tawaif and the poet Tawaif or Shair on the male gaze. That will be published in an upcoming collection from Oxford University Press. So I insisted because they wanted me to translate Manto's book, Manto's piece on the male gaze, how women are looked at by men, called Safed Jhoot. So I said that this is Ahmed Riaz's centenary year, so ये भी तवाइफ और शायर की नज़म भी उसी ही टॉपिक पे है, तो प्लीज़ इसको भी आप शामिल कर लें और मुझे कोई पेमेंट एक्स्ट्रा नहीं चाहिए इसकी. सो वो हैप्पीली दे एग्रीड और इस तरह से वो एक किताब में भी अहमद रियाज का नाम कहीं ना कहीं आ जाएगा. बट द थिंग इज दिस स्टोरी of someone of such a beautiful soul, such a sensitive soul who died spitting blood at the age of 32, told to me by Mr. Tariq, who is one of the most popular writers of his generation. It's just very ironic. And then the different attitudes which I told you about from the critics, from his own nephew. I mean, this is a really, no one I knew had heard of Ahmed Riaz, although he used to be the life of the party. मतलब महफिलों की जान होते थे 50-60 में, बल्कि लालपुर में अक्सर लोग कहते हैं कि अक्सर लोग जो एक खास एज पे पहुंच चुके हैं 70-80, वो अभी भी याद करते हैं अहमद रियाज को. उन्हें याद है कि ये शायर जो वहाँ मुशायरे लूटा करता था.
That is really inspiring, and you bring forward works from such marginalized and untold stories, and that's really commendable. Raza, now let's moving on to your role as the President, Progressive Writers Association in Lahore. You have the President for the last for over a decade now. So tell us quickly about your role as the President and what is your association with this Progressive Writers movement, PWA.
Yes.
Ji.
Yes. Thank you for giving me a chance to talk about this. Of course, the PWA, we don't teach the PWA in the textbooks, although it should be taught, because you know that Anjuman Tariq was the second largest all India organization after the Aligarh movement of Sir Syed Ahmed Khan, because it had writers and poets from almost every Indian language. And India is still a huge country. What English, what Bengali, what Kannada, what Telugu, what Tamil, all of the major Punjabi, all of the major writers anybody were part of the PWA, and it was blessed by the seniors like Josh Maliabadi and Firaq Gorakhpuri and even Rabindranath Tagore, who were not मतलब वो उस तरह से तरक्की पसंद तो नहीं थे, लेकिन उनके काम में तरक्की पसंदाना सोच आपको मिलती है. I can switch in Urdu, I hope. I can
most of our listeners they prefer English, so it's better to
sure. because I speak in tongues because I'm a translator. I'm basically a traveler of two worlds, so that is why I thought I can take that liberty. But it's okay, I'll switch to English. So yeah, I mean, so this was an organization which was set up in 1936, and Munshi Premchand, who was a towering writer of Urdu and Hindi, gave the presidential address. And next year in April, we'll be celebrating, inshallah, the 90th anniversary of this amazing organization. So this movement spawned some of the greatest writers in any language of the 20th century, and then after 47, it branched out into India and Pakistan, and now even in UK there is a Anjuman Taraqi Sunnatine, and people like Saif Mahmood Sahab and Noor Zahir, who is the daughter of one of the pioneers of the movement, Sajjad Zahir. They are the people who are involved in leading it into the 21st century. So it is a matter of privilege and pleasure for me to be part of this organization. And I've been a member of this organization since 2015 and a president since 1 year later. And obviously it's a responsibility. It's not just a pleasure, and as president of the PWA of the largest city in Pakistan, I get to meet a lot of young writers. We arrange book launches, we mentor new writers, new translators. Just yesterday, we had Dr. Maqbool Gilani, a big name in Saraiki letters, who was visiting from Multan. We had an evening in his honor. And we basically celebrate all our writers, whether their 100th anniversaries or 50th death anniversary. Just 2 weeks ago, we celebrated the death anniversary of Sajjad Zahir Sahab after many, many years. And his daughter Noor Zahir Sahaba sent a special message from London. Also, we have taken care to celebrate the 100th anniversaries of all the major writers in the last few years, from Krishan Chandra to Rajinder Singh Bedi, to Saadat Hasan Manto, to Sobhu Gyan Chandani, who was a legend of Sindhi writing. Ibrahim Joyo Sahab as well, who we celebrated when he was still alive. He died at the age of 105, and even now there are plans to celebrate. We are holding a series of commemorative conferences beginning from next month. There are so many writers who have passed into oblivion because the publishers don't take notice. This is the type of culture we are living in. So we also are trying to make these people relevant to the new generation. So that's a big challenge, and therefore, this is Hasrat Mohani Sahab's 150th year. What a great man he was. I'm writing an essay on him, and new aspects of his personality are being revealed to me while I'm doing my research. But one thing which is different from this PWA is that we are not closed-minded about other traditions. The earlier PWA was very much orthodox. They kicked out or had bad relations with many writers who they thought did not fit that definition of Tariq Pasandi. People like Manto, people like Bedi, people like Noor Rashid. By the way, Noor Rashid will be his 50th death anniversary will be coming up on the 9th of October. I am going to write my next piece on him. So many of these writers who were otherwise quite great writers, we expelled so many of them from the canon altogether. So now we don't do that mistake because there is no Moscow. So वो चीज जो है, that thing we are now consciously. So we also celebrate people like Nasir Kazmi, and whose centenary will be celebrated later this year, and people like Shurat Bukhari, who of course was one of the founders of the Halqa Arbab-e-Zawq, the other rival tradition to the Anjuman, but of course he has a legacy of political resistance as well. His wife Farkhanda Bukhari, what she suffered because she was a big supporter of the People's Party, and she was forcibly put on this plane which flew to London, and Shurat Bukhari, her husband, followed suit. So we celebrate some of these other writers who, if it had been an earlier generation, would have been expelled altogether because they did not subscribe to that definition of Tariq Pasandi. You know what I mean? So we celebrate Noor Rashid as we celebrate people like Hasrat Mohani. We celebrate people like Salimur Rahman Sahab, who of course has been the editor of of a progressive journal like Savera. But of course, many may not describe Salimur Rahman Saab as a progressive writer, but he's a fine poet and personality. I've met him, so I can vouch for that. So yeah, that is something which we have changed, and of course, I'm proud to tell you that the Anjuman has its units in 22 cities of Pakistan, including Gilgit-Baltistan. So a lot of young writers come to us from other parts of Pakistan, like Balochistan, like Quetta, like the Saraiki Waseb, young writers who want to be mentored, who come from other traditions and who may not be progressive in that aspect, but I believe all literature is progressive in a certain way. I mean, you just can't pigeonhole writing as being progressive or non-progressive. Just like Manto was wondering in 1948 that which literature should we put in Pakistani literature and which literature should we put in Hindustani literature. I mean, the description is not very clear-cut now. I mean, I think all literature gives us the weapons to dream and dare, and I mean, literature should be just literature without really being charged with but yeah, it should link itself with progressive values. I mean, it should create a feeling of being alive in you rather than fostering death and negative qualities in you. That is what we believe the function of progressive writing in the 21st century is, and I'm very happy to be associated with the PWA in the 21st century.
That's really fascinating. Raza, you have won that award for best paper on Sufi Shah Inayat Shaheed. So tell us quickly about that as well.
Quickly.
I deliberately said because we are in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the session of this show, and I want to cover most of the other areas also.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, Sufi Shah Inayat Shaheed is one of our great pioneers of Islamic socialism. Sibte Hassan Saab called him the Sufi socialist Sufi of the Indus Valley, and it was in his writing that I first encountered the name of Sufi Shah Inayat Shaheed. His book Naveed-e-Fikr, which is I think one of the great books to come out from the Ziaul Haq period. So I thought that he is a pioneer of Islamic socialism in the subcontinent. Before people like Allama Iqbal, Hasrat Mohani, came along, people like Maulana Bhashani, or from the part of the world where you come from, Abdur Rahim Popalzai, again an Islamic socialist. So he was the pioneer of this whole trend. So he needs to be, celebrated and written about, and therefore I used the sources of Tuhfatul Kiram, which is in Farsi, which was written by one of the court historians of Kalhora. The Kalhora dynasty was one of the dynasties which was ruling Sindh at the time when Sufi Shah Inayat Shaheed was martyred, and the Mughal Empire was in its decline. I mean, the Emperor Farrukh Sayar was in power, and this was the movement led by the movement of the Fakirs led by Sufi Shah Inayat Shaheed, which said Jeko khide so khaye. Matlab, whoever tills the land has the right to the produce. So he led this movement, and there were 30,000 Fakirs, and I think it became the longest running armed struggle in the history of peasant uprisings. Unfortunately, we don't celebrate it enough. We celebrate the Paris Commune, although the Paris Commune also Marx wrote about it. It ended in failure. It was the first socialist uprising of peasants, but that is not correct. When I consulted the sources, I found out that Sufi Shah Inayat Shaheed, the movement was the forerunner of the Paris Commune, and it was besieged inside their fort in Jhok for about 3 months until the Mughals deceived Sufi Shah Inayat. They couldn't break the siege. They said, okay, come out. They took an oath on the Quran. And obviously Sufi Shah Inayat Shaheed, being a Sufi, he had no way to doubt the word of God. So despite advice from his fakirs that this is a deception, he opened the doors of the fortress of Chok. He was brought into the tent of the Subedar, and he was put in chains. and the Mughal Subedar deceived him in the name of the Quran, and he was beheaded. And according to, I mean, in Islam, there's this whole tradition of Besar Nam, Mansur Hallaj and Sarmad, people being beheaded. And the head of Sufi Shah Inayat Shahid it walked and it recited some poetry which was collected in Besar Nama. This is, unfortunately, the Besar Nama is now lost, but the fakirs in the aftermath of the execution of Shah paid the price. So 20 to 30,000 fakirs were slaughtered just for the crime of saying La ilaha, because La ilaha was associated with the Sufi movement. So this was the largest massacre in the history of Islam. I mean, we talk about Karbala with a lot of respect, but not so many people were killed. 72 odd people were killed in Karbala, but this movement, the cost of the Sufi Shah Inayat Shahid was paid by 30,000 fakirs. All were massacred in Jhok, and now if you go to Jhok Sharif, his Urs is celebrated after the Urs of Shah Bhitai. I think Bhitai also made a reference to Sufi Shah Inayat in one of his oblique, poems in the Risalo, but because he could not be very obvious, but so the graveyard of those Sufis is there in Jhok for all of us to ponder about. So this movement, I thought, needed to be remembered, because in English there's no record of Sufi Shah Inayat Shahid. So I took these sources and I wrote a paper, and there is a university here in Lahore called Minhaj University, where they have a conference on world religions every year. I'm writing my paper on Hazrat Mahani for this conference this year. So in October 2019, I presented that paper, and owing to the strength of my sources from Persian and Urdu, it was adjudged to be the best paper, and that was an unforgettable experience from 2019, having to present that paper. And now actually that paper has been translated into Gurmukhi as well, because someone from Amritsar read that paper, Chandigarh read that paper in The Wire, and he wanted to translate it. He thought that this Sufi Shah Inayat was the Murshid of Baba Bulle Shah, but I said no, that Sufi Shah Inayat was also from the Qadariya Silsila, but he died a natural death. He's buried in Lahore. This one was actually, he was martyred. So then that whole paper was translated into Gurmukhi, and it was published in a very respectable Punjabi journal called Tasman, which I have a print copy of, and I'm very proud that the story of Sufi Shah Inayat Shahid has now crossed the border. So this is another story of marginalized and buried histories which one excavates from the pages of history. I'm very proud and happy to have a chance to research it.
That's brilliant, and we are now in the last 5 to 6 minutes of the show. So, Raza, we discussed that you received that Charles Wallace Trust Fellowship, and today you are being awarded with the Anjum Romani Award, and it's a great thing to know and to share with our listeners. So quickly tell us about this relation, like you had received that award maybe a decade ago, and now tonight you will be awarded this award. So what do you see in this connection?
I think one does not write consciously for the prizes. But I think it is a fallacious notion to write for the prizes. It's very nice that, once or twice in your life I don't take my work very seriously, to be very honest with you, but more than prizes, it reminded me of something which this great British poet and playwright, Tony Harrison, who's just passed away a couple of days ago. He was also a proud alumnus of the University of Leeds, like I am. This is why I'm quoting him. What I'm proud of at the end of the day is that I remember in 2014, on Krishan Chandra's 100th birthday. You know, he was educated at SC College. So SC College, held a seminar in two sessions, and they invited me to present a translation of Krishan Chandra, and Intezar Hussain Saab, the late, he was presiding, and I translated Krishan Chandra's story, Ek Tawaif Ka Khat Jinnah Aur Nehru Ke Daam. It's amazing. I mean, I don't know if you've read it. But I remember, I can be proud of that when I was reading that translation, there was pin drop silence in the room. And I saw, some of the students who had tears in their eyes. They suddenly started sobbing. And of course, I was not even reading it in my Urdu. I mean, in Krishan Chandra's Urdu. In Urdu, it's much more powerful. So this thing that, this translation, although it was in another language, the fact that it touched them so deeply, and it brings that kind of a response from the audience. For me, it's much better than a literary prize, or a rave review maybe. I think someone reviewing my translation and giving me 5 stars. That feeling of being human, which connects my audience with something which I have written or translated. But yes, it's this is it's always nice to be recognized non-controversially. And on a lighter note, when Dr. Abral called me to give me the news 3 days ago about the fact that I'm getting the Bazme Anjum Romani prize for performance, and I said, well, what have I done to deserve this prize? I wonder, and he said laughingly, आपको अदब ना खराब करने का prize मिला है. I mean, a prize for not damaging literature further. So that in itself was actually quite a satisfaction. It's a telling statement also on the state of literature in our part of the world. What sort of lobbies are here, and how the whole prize circuit is, I'm talking about the national awards, the awards which are given out every year on 23rd March and 14 August, and next year they are cashed. So, so this was also a comment, although it passed off in a lighter note. So I'm always going to take that about anything else. It's a prize for not damaging literature further. I think writers shouldn't write for prizes, but if along the way some sort of recognition comes along, then all the better, and it certainly prepares them and motivates them for the challenges of the next week or the next day. And for me, every day is a new day. Yes, I will be going to receive the prize today, but tomorrow it will be another day, and I will be back to my workshop, back to my work, back to translating what I do best. And I think this kind of work never lets you rest, and this is the kind of thing, sometimes you even mess up your own life in order to get to that moment. What moment? The moment when, you think that you're done and everything has been done and dusted, but then something comes along and you say, no, sometimes, I've suffered from those moments as well. I've been out of work for long periods of time just to get to that moment, to say that, yes, I finished my work with this level of intensity, and I think the work should be done.
That's great. And Raza, that's really great. And Raza, we are in the last couple of minutes, and I would like you to share any of your translated poems or whatever work you want to share in a couple of minutes, please.
Yes, this is a short poem from Ishrat Afshin Saiba from Junkie Diary, and the poem is very short, and the translation is also short. So with Ishrat Appa's permission, it's called Khamoshi, and it's pretty self-obvious. First I will share the Urdu and then my translation. Ishrat Appa कहती हैं, she's of course talking about the war in Gaza. मसला ये नहीं मरे कितने जख्मी हैं कितने बेघर हैं. मसला ये नहीं मरे कितने जख्मी हैं कितने बेघर हैं. मसला है हमारी खामोशी, भयानक भी है तवील भी है. मसला है हमारी खामोशी जो भयानक भी है तवील भी है. And I've translated it as silence. The issue is not how many died, how many are injured, how many are homeless. The issue is not how many died, how many are injured, how many are homeless. The issue is our silence, which is alarming too, protracted as well. The issue is our silence, which is alarming too, protracted as well. So Ishrat Appa wrote this poem Khamoshi on 5th January 2024, and I've just shared the poem and my humble English translation of the poem with you.
That was wonderful, listeners. This was an insightful and wonderful discussion with our esteemed guest, Mr. Raza Naeem. Raza, I am genuinely grateful to you once again for taking time out for this show, and I am sure that our listeners must have enjoyed and learned a lot. And we discussed about his translations, about PWA, and we discussed so many other things. And this was from today's show. This is your host Imad Kasir, signing off from Planet FM 87.6 program. The show is Mind and Muse. Until next time, Allah Hafiz.